Hey friends, it's Danielle with Schoolhouse Rud. Ooh, heavy topic here. I just finished watching all 3 episodes of The Devil in the Family, the Downfall of Ruby Franke documentary. And this case had been particularly interesting to me because I was a follower of that channel for a long time. You know, they came into fame a couple of years, about the same time I became a mom. But a couple of years later, 2017, I started my homeschool journey, and that's what type of content was being put into my algorithm at the time. I'd sort of switched from the stuff that I was watching to more family vlog and homeschool and just like wholesome content. And that channel was one of the ones that I watched faithfully. So I felt not only connected in a sort of way when this all happened, but I felt horrified and shocked and such like, what about those poor kids? Oh my goodness. I became so interested in it because, like I said, I had been following them for so long and not really understanding at the time, but like I feel like everyone watched those kids grow up, so to speak, and none of us really deserved to. Their lives should have been kept private, but this has brought to light a very interesting thing that's happening with YouTube right now and family vloggers, and it's definitely put into perspective how much I don't want my child's information and things like that online. So I'm a little bit teary because I just finished it, and that was really a heavy watch for me. There were things, of course, that I didn't know that were revealed. To show you how much I had been like interested in this case, I bought this when this came out. I still haven't read it. I bought it, I intended to read it, and I put it on my nightstand, and it's made its way to a drawer, and I haven't touched it since. And part of me just didn't want to. I think that when it all came out, I had an opinion, and I watched the body cam footage, and you know, I just kind of pieced together things on my own. And as more evidence started to come out, I started to realize how right I had been about the things that were coming out, and how much my mindset had shifted from, wow, this is, you know, an amazing, inspirational woman. I went from, why can't I be like her? She's in the kitchen at 6 a.m. making French toast for her 6 children, and this one's playing the violin, and this one's playing the piano. Like, wow, she runs her household with such smoothness and seamlessness, and all of her kids are so well behaved. But you don't realize that it's not reality, and you're being duped. And I think that for so many of us who grew up watching things on reality TV and later realized how unrealistic these things were, it's very heavy to come to that realization and to realize, wow, things just really aren't what they seem. So when I started to piece together things from the case, and I watched the body cam footage and her journal that came out, my gosh, I mean, I can't connect with it anymore. One thing that really snapped me from wanting to be like her and when this came out, before this came out, she had gotten really weird and, you know, was posting crazy things, and it just didn't resonate with me anymore. Her content didn't resonate with me anymore, and they weren't popping up in my algorithm, so I kind of, you know, just fell off as a viewer. But it kind of snapped for me when I realized how much I did not resonate with what she was putting out there anymore. And when she was arrested, I remember thinking, like, okay, how much of this was Jody and how much of this was her? When that journal was released and I read those pages, holy shit, I don't think I've ever been so angry with my child that I would want to cause him physical pain. I mean, as a mom, like, you want to protect your kids from things, be that other people hurting them or evil or whatever. And I just imagine my own child and the things that she would do to the very people that she brought into this world. Like, she's not somebody that I want to be like ever. And I can't believe that I spent a couple of years of my motherhood looking up to this woman and trying to be like her. I'm actually disgusted that I ever could relate to her as a mom. But that was my full reaction to the releasing of all the evidence. Now, when it comes to the documentary, I watched all 3 episodes in one day, and there were still things that I learned that I didn't know before. And if you haven't seen it, go watch it. You'll probably come out horrified, maybe even teary. Who knows? One of the things that they said, Shari said, was that the mother beat Chad so bad one time, and Chad got a bloody nose, and that she went and helped him clean the blood off the walls. I mean, what? So there was a lot of things going on behind the scenes way before Jodi even came in the picture. Kevin, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to think. I don't know. It's not my journey and it's not my story. And I'm certainly not anybody to judge or criticize. But man, there's a scene in that documentary where one of the little ones was on the table and Ruby grabbed her by the face and, kind of roughly pushed her off the table. And Kevin's the one holding the camera, and Kevin says, "Oh, cut." So he knew kind of the militant, I would say mean way that she raised those kids. And I know he wasn't home a lot because he worked, but in that instance, he's literally holding the camera and talking from behind it. So, I know that he's not been charged with anything and he was removed when all this had happened. And I just really think that there should have been a lot of reflection on the part where we're talking to him about what happened before Jodi came into the picture, because they're filming stuff and I didn't know who the other kid was, but it was Chad, and they were not being cooperative. And Ruby says, just use their faces and be real. And you can hear them talking about how they're there to work and they're not cooperating and things like that. And I know that likely that could have been the Universal trip where Jodi did get involved. But needless to say, watching that and realizing that there was a degree of just horrifying treatment of these children for a long time before Jodi entered this case. I mean, it really makes you re-examine, because originally I thought, oh, Jodi was the influence of this, and Ruby did what Jodi was counseling her to do. Yes, Ruby did it, but was Jodi feeding her this information? And it's like, I don't know, because we know Jodi is horrible because of her niece, Jessie, coming out and saying all the things that she did and bringing to light all the things that she went through. But my goodness, this has turned into these poor family members just airing it all out to the whole world to see. And I can't imagine what they've gone through, and I can't imagine, what that's like. But I will say this, when all this came out and I was watching everything unfold and I was watching all the body cam footage and we got to Pam Botcher, I knew something was wrong. And I watched that body camera footage a couple of times, and I came up with my own theory. And I felt this way long before people started to put her under the microscope. In fact, I filmed a video, and I will put footage in here of me filming this video. It was really about how to write a persuasive essay and how to do the research to get evidence-based backup for the claims that you are making in a research paper. So I did this for educational purposes, but I never ended up publishing the footage because it didn't feel right, because it was me and my opinion of the body camera footage. But now that this has all come to light, and now that Shari has released her book, and now that the documentary has come to light, I feel like it's okay to at least speculate on Pam Botcher's body cam footage. And Chad has since said that Pam Botcher's in hiding. So no doubt that she knows more than she says she does. And the persuasive essay lesson that I was doing on this, you'll see why my thoughts are what they are. But I'll put that footage in so y'all can at least see it. And I'll narrate over it so you kind of know where I was going with that. But yeah, this is my raw reaction to watching that documentary, and to the 6 Franke children. I am so sorry. I don't have words to put out there that could ever change or make it better, or even try to make sense of what you guys went through. You have so many supporters and so much love from the internet, and I get it. We should not all know your stories. Your trauma should not be out for the entire world to see. But it is. And when you guys are old enough, and if you are going to tell your stories, then you guys have all the support. I think that the world has embraced Shari as an adult and really supported her in her efforts to share her truth. And same with Chad. So to the other 4 children, you know, you guys have a lot of support, and I wish you nothing but the best and wonderful lives. And there's a lot of healing that needs to be done, and just pray that you get that healing that you need. The only other thing I want to say after watching was, you know, I did see an interview where Kevin mentioned that Ruby likely learned some of these tactics from her own childhood. And, well, I guess we'll never know what the involvement of her, Ruby's family was. But I have to say this. This entire time, there has been more outcry from strangers on the internet than there has been any of Ruby's immediate family. All of her siblings, her parents, everybody. There has been hardly anything mentioned. In fact, I do remember at some point Shari was on, I think it was the Daru Crew, one of the sisters' channels, and I think it was like around a holiday or a birthday or something. And I just remember they were celebrating and like nothing was mentioned. But in the book, Shari mentions going over to her Aunt Julie's house and that the other sisters came and they all had a meal together, and Shari kind of explained what was going on. I know that at some point they all just thought it was like super religious-y and they just kind of pulled away. But this stuff has been going on since their childhood, the way they were treated. So you know that they had to have known to some degree. I get that they didn't know the crazy out there stuff, the stuff at Jody's house, I get that. But to some degree, that family had to have known something. And especially when they all cut off Ruby. and just stopped talking about the kids. I mean, if I can't say what I would do in that situation, but if I cut off one of my siblings for whatever reason, I would, and I thought that the kids were in danger, I would do something. I don't know what it is that I would do, but I would do something. But it has been radio silence from just about everybody, except to clear their name and their involvement, to say that they're not like her. And in fact, while Shari is out there advocating against family vlogging, and while Kevin's reading statements from the youngest daughter, Bonnie's just doubling down like, my kids want to do this and I am their consent. And it just looks like they all turn their heads the other way, and so be it. So these are my opinions, obviously. This is just me as an outsider watching and kind of forming my own opinion. It's what I, am doing to write a persuasive essay, right? So I'm going to insert the footage about Pam now that was filmed, and I will put the date in there that I filmed it. And I hope that you enjoy, number one, learning how I think and how I process information and use it to gather facts to form my essay. And number two, I hope you learned something. And yeah, this is purely for entertainment. I don't know what all I'm supposed to say legally, yada, yada, yada. This is just me, a normal person, watching and reacting and giving my commentary. And here you are with that persuasive essay evidence.
Okay, so today we are going to talk about the evidence or the facts of Pam Botcher as she is related to the case against Ruby Franke and Jody Hildebrandt and the horrible CA that they did to two of Ruby's children. So Pam Botcher lives in American Fork with her husband, and she picked up Jay from the rec center, and she picked up A from her job and took them to Rolly's ice cream barn. I mean, how many times was she going to say that in her police cam videos when they showed the interaction with her? I was like, okay, I think I counted at least 3 times where she repeated the exact same statement. That's fact. My kind of presumption or inkling, my suspicion, is that she rehearsed that, and that's why she kept saying it over and over again. So the police show up at her home looking for Jay because in their search to find these children, they somehow ended up at the Springville Rec Center, and they were given the information that Pam Botcher and American Fork picked up Jay. So Pam has the 2 middle Franke children at her home the day of Ruby and Jody's arrests. That is fact. Another thing that Pam continued to state in the police body cam footage, she kept saying this, and when she said it, I looked at what time it was. She said that she had guests coming in that night from Costa Rica. And that was her entire alibi as to why she had those two children. Because she treated them to ice cream at Rollies and made them scrub the floorboards or mop or whatever it was that they were doing. So she's trying to convince the police that that is all that's going on. So we then learn that the other Franke child's in the house. Now we've got both of them out there. So things start to get a little interesting. And as they are detaining Pam and making contact with the children, DCFS is on the way to collect them. Information is coming in about the case itself and what all had been observed when officers got the first child rescued and saw the extent of his wounds. Remember, they spent 4 hours in the closet with the other child. So it wasn't known the extent of what she endured until she came out of that closet and went to the hospital for a full examination. So I suspect that details were continuing to pour in to the St. George Police Department as the police in American Fork are conducting this search warrant. Now, I look at the time and I notice that it's something like 6 in the evening. And I thought, okay, she still has to bring them home, as she says. She said she was bringing them home that evening. And it's already 6:30. Then she throws in the detail that the girls wanted to learn how to make something, jam or salsa or some shit. They wanted to learn how to can stuff. So, it was salsa because they were going to pick the tomatoes. They've made jam with her before, as she said. All this from her involvement with the police department. She said they were going to pick the tomatoes. She was going to show them how to make salsa. And she says they were going to can the salsa. The police were at her residence until well after 7-ish. And we also saw from the arrest body cam footage that Ruby and Jody were not formally taken from the police station to the jail until about 8 o'clock. So at this point, they're detained in the police station for questioning. What does she mean she has guests coming in from Costa Rica later that evening when it's already well after 7 o'clock? And you have to teach these kids how to pick tomatoes, can them, make some salsa, can it, all that. Then you're going to bring them home to Springville and then come back and then entertain guests from Costa Rica. So my suspicion here is that these are not either personal guests, like she's renting out an Airbnb or something, or she's just picking up somebody from a flight, maybe going straight to bed. I'm not quite sure of what her intentions are with these guests, but I just found it awfully odd that those couple phrases she kept repeating, as if to proclaim, and here's a suspicion, I'm innocent, I'm not involved. Because remember, here comes some fact. She initially, when the cops showed up, talked about how she knew their mom. Their mom's a good friend. They come over to my house to do some cleaning for me sometimes. I've taught them how to make jam, done all these things, right? Husband even says, oh, yeah, Ruby, that's Pam's friend. Yeah, I met their dad a couple times. So they're vouching for these people. And then all of a sudden, when they start to question Pam, well, what do you do? Well, how do you know them? Because they realize the situation's a lot worse than they thought. And they realize the condition that these kids were in, trained to not speak to the police, be terrified of them, admit that they were afraid of them, and generally not be cooperative. And the police are sensing something's up. So they start asking her questions, and she immediately takes the stance that she doesn't really know Ruby that well. Okay? She's saying, oh, they have some type podcast, some like Connexions. You know, I'm sure she talked about the X with the X. And they do podcasts sometimes, and she really downplays her friendship and involvement with these two women. And at the time, I thought, well, that's strange, being that they're so heavily involved in Connexions, and she's the damn president of Connexions. What, does she not know what's going on in her company? It was enough to raise suspicion, but it wasn't enough to really put it out there at the time that I didn't trust this woman's credibility at all, and I didn't really trust her narrative. As things start to emerge about the case, and we're starting to see body cam footage of the arrest, and the journal comes out, and I'm just realizing Kevin Franke's testimony, or questioning, interrogation, confession, whatever you want to call Kevin Franke's second police interview, was beyond disturbing and eye-opening. And it outlines just how close the three of them, Pam, Jody, and Ruby, actually were leading up to Kevin and Ruby's separation. So Pam cannot sit there and say, without telling a lie, she cannot sit there and say that she doesn't really know Ruby all that well. I watched this body cam footage when it first came out and thought, that's odd that she doesn't know them that well, especially because her husband was saying that they were pretty good friends, and she just got finished saying that the girls come over quite frequently to do all these things with her, and she treated him to ice cream and picked him up from work because she made him clean. That doesn't sound like somebody you barely know to me, or somebody you don't really know to me. It sounds like somebody you know quite well, have their phone number in your phone, and communicate with them frequently so that you know where her children are, and in an emergency, in a family crisis, she calls you. But remember, you don't really know her all that well. That math's not mathin', Pam. And let's be clear here. The evidence stacked against Ruby Franke is so damning. I do not understand how the state of Utah has not put forth the motion to charge her with attempted murder, attempted kidnapping and imprisonment, for outlining plans to bring those children down to Arizona on a deserted desert ranch to continue the interventions, as she wrote in her journal. The interventions that thus far had left the children in absolutely despicable, frail condition. I do believe that Russell did not have much longer in the condition that he was in. And from her confessions, it sounded like he was made to abstain from food, water, adequate toilet facilities. It sounds like he was deprived of those life-sustaining elements for quite some time. So I think that he saw his chance to escape when he did, and left because he knew it was now or never. So he tried one last time, and thank God that those neighbors were there to intervene. They saved this child's life, and he, in turn, saved his own and his sister's life, and possibly the older two sisters as well. So he's a hero. If anybody needs to be recognized, it's him. It's that 12-year-old boy that escaped and ran to a neighbor's home for help. It's him. Back to Pam. All of a sudden, when this evidence has come out, Kevin says that the three women, Pam, Jody, Ruby, would lock themselves in a room for hours and go into trances. Anything that we could say about these trances would be speculation, unless you were to actually be reading the pen papers that he mentioned. But until that document is released, we won't be able to confirm or deny what did or did not take place in these trances. But we know that Pam Botcher was locked in a room with Jody Hildebrandt and Ruby Franke for hours at a time in Ruby's residence. So she straight up lied to the police. Her involvement needs to be questioned immediately, if it hasn't been already. Because let's face it, maybe there's ongoing things that cannot be commented upon, and those things haven't been released to the public yet. But if they have not started investigating this woman, I urge the American Fork Police Department to open up investigation on her. Heck, I even encourage Springville and St. George. Hey, Utah Division of the FBI, get involved also. DCFS, every agency that's involved in this already needs to get back on this and get Pam under the microscope. Because if they don't, this will continue. Pam will get other people. They will do things more carefully next time. And they will know how to avoid getting caught. The interventions and the restraining of the children, any future children that, God forbid, this ever were to happen to, would likely become more intense to prevent them running away. So she cannot be dismissed in the slightest. Fact, I have seen many people calling her husband shady or creepy or controlling or manipulative. I am not a psychologist or psychiatrist. I haven't studied psychology. I am not an expert. But I do know when little girls are afraid to upset a man. And those two teenage daughters of hers, we cannot see their faces, but their body language is very telling. Jay stepped out of the house when she was called, only when she was called out by him. Same thing with Abby. When Jay stepped out on the front door, she just stands there looking forward. And then Pam's husband starts to speak, and her head immediately pivots to look at him. He tells her, you can go ahead and sit down in that chair right there. She does exactly that, nothing more, nothing less. She is completely subservient and honestly, I believe terrified of this man. But she is definitely trained to obey. I don't know what Pam knows about this case, but I do know that she's involved. I'm unsure if she knows of the physical extent of the injuries, but I guarantee you she knows what methodology, and at the very least, she knows that there's an attempted exorcism going on. And she is in support of these things. That's why she's handling the older kids up where they live, so that Ruby and Jody can do this self-proclaimed miracle intervention on the two younger ones, so that Jody and Ruby can promote this type of parenting, put it out there, and then promote this ranch. Oh, look, Chad went to Anasazi, straightened him out. He's totally cured now because he came home and wasn't straight, but I straightened the rest of him. So now I'm mom of the century and I can do it for you. Send me your troubled kids. I cannot imagine the hell that would have been constructed if her own children, the ones that she birthed into this world, her own children were so severely abused. Can you imagine? I don't think I can. They were already in a concentration, like minimalistic existence, that I fear to think what she would do to some other person's child that she has zero emotional attachment to. Thank God they were stopped and put away. 4 years is not enough if that's all they end up getting. But again, they knew how to play the legal system. They hired expert, expensive lawyers who were very familiar with Utah law. And they were prepared. Ruby called Jody. Jody called Ruby to tell her, code red. This is what's going on. R's not here. So she had to have been involved, because if R was just, sitting out on the patio for a couple of hours and they never checked on him, how would she know he was missing? So the fact that she knew he was missing within 20 or so minutes, she was checking up on him. She knew. She was involved by pushing him into a pool, taking him on drives and making them lay down and face the back of the seats and nobody would see them. Taking the other ones down to Arizona to find property. It's so messed up. And to think that they had these trances with Pam just goes to show that there was more to come. Because as Kevin stated, those pen papers were to be turned into scripture and then released for others to read. No one was supposed to see them until they were turned into scripture. Where are they? Because from what it sounded like, the police said that they got Ruby's notebook journals, not the 3-inch thick leather bound book that said the pen papers on it, as Kevin Franke described. It was a pretty accurate description, so it was pretty clear that that's not what the police department actually had. That's not what was published. Those are yet to be released. So there's going to be even more effed up shit coming. And there already is so much about this case that we don't know because of those blacked out redacted pages. We know that she held his head underwater at one point. She admitted to doing that in the plea deal. Yet that was not recorded in the journal. She mentions that he tried to cool off by putting his head in the toilet. She mentions that she dumps mop water on him. She mentioned the part about putting her hand over his face to pretend like she was putting oxygen on him under the water. But my interpretation was that they were not in water at that point. So somewhere there was a water incident that we have not read about in the journal. I suspect that that is what one section of the blacked out journal contains. But I think that there's so much more that we don't know. But I can tell you who knows a whole lot about it, and it's Pam Botcher. Everyone needs to be questioned. The fact that Ruby's family defended these people is disgusting. And the only one with common sense to come out and put out a statement against this, whether you believe she's being selfish or not, because let's face it, she's faced a lot of scrutiny for how she's handled and reacted to this situation. But as many have pointed out, she's kin. Why doesn't she have those kids? Why are there no phone calls to the police? There's one from Shari. So where were the phone calls from the siblings of Ruby? No, instead we get crying videos or explanation videos or my side of my sister's story videos. No one says a word about the children. And I said that and pointed it out, and I was met with comments like, they can't. Are you thick-headed? There's a gag order. No, there's a gag order to talk about them and details as it relates to the case. But coming out and saying that they need prayer, coming out and saying that what they endured was traumatic, coming out and saying, please respect their privacy as they heal. Saying anything is not saying anything about them related to the case. But no one talked about it, about the children. It was all, we didn't know. So the siblings and her parents, whatever and whoever, are putting out videos proclaiming their innocence. That's exactly what they're doing. They're trying to get the heat off of them because they don't want to be investigated next. And the only one who has come out against what has happened and who has finally said something about what the children endured, she is the only one who did not defend Ruby. She's been very adamant from the beginning that she's horrified, that she didn't know, but she also told a story about how they distanced and about how Ruby's kids were trying to indoctrinate her own kids. She knew what was going on. And if she truly tried to stop it, she would have called the police. Maybe she called DCFS, who knows? But she was not granted guardianship of those children. And now we need to figure out why.